Richard Fitzwilliams is a royal commentator and film critic known for his expertise in the British honours system, which is quite convenient because the King's birthday honours will be announced later on tonight, I believe, and of course tomorrow will be Trooping the Colour, the centuries-old parade which officially commemorates the King's birthday. And Richard is on the line with us here. Good afternoon, how are you?
Good afternoon. I'm looking forward to seeing who makes it in this year's honours, the birthday honours. They're usually about 1,200 individuals. The vast majority are those who've done something for society. A philanthropic link is particularly significant. And also, of course, to seeing the Trooping the Colour, as you mentioned, the King's birthday parade dating back to the early 19th century and probably before that, and also one of the magnificent ceremonial pieces of the year.
We'll come to Trooping the Colour a bit later, but first of all, for the honours, do you have any particular predictions about who might get one?
Well, of course, we can't look forward to the list without mentioning David Beckham, can we?
Of course.
I think that everybody expects him to get a knighthood, if not now, certainly very, very soon. And we know he's an ambassador for the King's charity. We also know that the numbers of caps he had for England, his charitable work for UNICEF, also his role in getting the Olympics for Britain and in 2012. And there's absolutely no question the Beckhams are A-list celebrities, but also there's a tremendously strong vein of achievement. The fact that so much is written about them and that there may have been glitches when it comes to certain tax allegations and emails, it's not the point. David Beckham has a very, very solid record of achievement. Nobody can dispute that. I think it's 115 caps for England, former captain. So, you are looking at somebody who is bound to get a knighthood sooner rather than later.
Yeah, because he's not got one at the moment, but I think a lot of people think he does. The amount of times I've heard people say Sir David Beckham, and they don't realise it's wrong.
Well, it is wrong, but then, of course, again, as far as I know this year with the honours, we haven't had what we've had in so many past years, and I think it's deplorable, and that is people leaking moles in the system, leaking the names of those or name a particularly prominent figure or figures who might well be honoured. Luckily, this time we haven't had it, and of course, it's worth remembering that we've got some new members of the Order of the Garter. That is the oldest and most senior honour dating back to 1348 in Edward III, and that is a very splendid ceremony, rather resembling a sort of medieval tableau, I have to say, which the King will be attending, and also senior members of the royal family on Monday. So far as the list is concerned, of course, the vast majority tend to be members of the Order of the British Empire, and there are a variety of grades in this, and also, there are some in the gift of the monarch, the vast majority in the gift of the government, and it's supposed to be handled by independent committees. The system is very, very much more appropriate now than it was, 20 years ago. It was positively archaic.
I guess we'll have the headlines about all the celebrities getting honours and all the people we know, but I suppose you mentioned 12,000 will go out, so most of them are going to be people that we either have never heard of or are not really famous at all, but they work in their own communities.
Oh yes, that's the way it should be. Now, I said 1,200 actually.
Oh, is it?
That would be spreading it if there were 12, if there were more. But in point of fact, the percentages now would tend to be roughly 50-50 when there's a breakdown between the sexes, but also, most particularly, and in recent years this has been a characteristic of the list, the fact that the majority now, indeed often as much as 70%, is not only for doing, so to speak, the day job or a particular achievement, but also the philanthropic aspect of it. That is very, very significant.
A lot of recommendations do come from public nominations. So how important do you think that the public input is into the honours system?
I don't know the exact percentage, but I do know that since 1993, when John Major, but it was Prime Minister, encouraged this, it's always had been a possibility, but I mean, this was specifically a sort of making a sort of people's honours, the idea that anybody could write into the ceremonial unit of the Cabinet Office with referees and suggest someone. Often, as you say, someone who isn't well known. I mean, the vast majority of names aren't, but equally, someone whose work might not necessarily come to the attention of the others, those who make the decisions, but this is it's a far better way of handling the system when you've got local input, but also there is much more awareness now that certain regions are not represented perhaps as well as they should. They're very, very significant that there are a certain percentage, I don't know the exact percentage now, but for persons of colour, for example, that everybody feels that the system is inclusive. There are, of course, still a few state servants, and sometimes state servants who shouldn't get them, in my opinion anyway, do. But that tends to make a headline. When you have a headline where one or two individuals get an honour and you feel that they shouldn't, but if you consider that there are over 1,000, it brings a tremendous pleasure often to those who are in small communities or helping in, sometimes in quite small but very significant ways, to the health service, to charity and so forth. And that is the bedrock of the system. It isn't the bit that's publicised. Of course, you're right. I mean, the celebrities do tend to be the photographs on the papers.
Now, of course, as you mentioned, it's mainly selected by a committee. How much say does the king himself get in the honours, if at all? Is it all done by the committee, or I think, what is it, like the order of the something that is only chosen by the monarch?
There are certain honours that are in the gift of the monarch, and for example, the Order of Merit, or for example, the Royal Victorian Order, the Order of the Garter, which I mentioned, which is a senior order in Britain and also in England, and there's the Order of the Thistle, which is the most senior in Scotland, the Royal Victorian Order, and there are several grades to this. This is very often for service personally rendered to a member of the royal family, and that's a particularly good one. One of the aspects that I think is very significant when you've got grades is that it does encourage initiative and incentive, because you've got you're grade number one, say, and there are 3 or 4, and then there's the initiative, there's the incentive to go higher, so you do more, and I think that's a very good system. The problem, of course, with this system is that it is linked to prime ministerial resignation honours, because they are also honours, and there have been undoubtedly excesses. That is a problem.
Now, of course, we've got the honours tonight, but tomorrow we've got Trooping the Colour, which is the second in the reign of King Charles III, but it will be the first since his cancer diagnosis, and also since the Princess of Wales cancer diagnosis as well. So how do you think this year's event might be different from previous ones with that in mind? I mean, will it be slightly different?
Oh, it will indeed. I mean, last year the king was the first monarch since 1986 to ride at the trooping. Queen Elizabeth used the horse Burmese, which was given to her by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police for about 17 years. And then 1986, when Burmese was retired, she used to carry out the inspection in Queen Victoria's phaeton. What will happen this year is apparently, because, as you mentioned, he's undergoing treatment for cancer, the king, together with Queen Camilla, will be reviewing the parade from a carriage. So firstly you have the entrance of the monarch, and then also the inspection. When the inspection will occur, the king, as I understand it, will be in a carriage going down the lines. And then, of course, when the colour is trooped, and this was a signal in past centuries during the smoke and thunder of battle. So if there was the colour which someone was holding, you would know that it would just help distinguish friend from foe. This could often mean the difference between defeat and victory. And the king will review the parade, and